Vancouver is a beautiful city. There's absolutely no doubt, but it is a complicated place, as every city is. And there are so many suburbs, so many neighborhoods that appeal to different types of people. And you want to make sure when you're thinking of moving here that you're going to settle your family into the right spot. You don't want to make a mistake, a very costly mistake, by moving to the wrong place. And you're only going to realize that after spending a lot of money, and it's going to cost you a lot of money to pick up those roots and resettle somewhere else. So let's help you make the right choice, the right decision. That's what we're going to do in this video. It's focused exclusively on the city of Vancouver. I'm not talking about any of the suburbs. That's going to be a future video, but we're going to talk about my favorite neighborhoods in the city of Vancouver. And that's coming from a perspective, a biased perspective, of course, but the perspective of a lifelong resident. I was born and raised in this city. I'm raising 4 young children in this city, and I'm also a real estate agent. And I've helped hundreds of people over my 15-year career resettle in Vancouver and find not only the right neighborhood, but the right home in those neighborhoods. I'm going to walk you through this city. We're going to start right now.
Now, let's start with Dunbar. There we are. On the west side of Vancouver, Dunbar's over here. There is a Dunbar Street. And Dunbar, you'll find prices in Dunbar to be, for single family residential, to be well above 30%, sort of a typical house price in the city of Vancouver. In terms of condominiums, there's not a lot. It's primarily a single family residential neighborhood. You're very close to UBC, which is right out here, and some of the best private schools. There's St. George's Boys Private School, Lord Byng Secondary over here, and Kerrisdale Elementary School is over here. Prince of Wales Secondary is over here. So you're well served by a large number of schools. It's a quiet, primarily family oriented neighborhood, very accessible to the outdoors. And just to the south, you'll see some of the best golf clubs. There's the McCleary Golf Course, the Point Grey Golf and Country Club, and the Shaughnessy Golf Club right there. There's also the UBC Golf Club over here, and beaches to the north, really nice beaches, and still not too far from the downtown core. So what we have for commuting times, anywhere from 15 minutes to 35 minutes, basically, to get from here over here to the downtown core. And if you're taking the bus, that would take roughly 25 minutes. And at the moment, the only way to get from there to over here is by bus. There is a Skytrain extension that is being built and will run roughly up till here. That'll make things a little easier to get to the other parts of the city, which traditionally have been a little challenging in a neighborhood as far west as Dunbar. There's also Point Grey up here, this area that's a little bit closer to the water. So most of what you'll find in terms of living situations are single family residential homes. A lot of them will have income suites catering to UBC students. And then you have a smaller number of condo developments, mainly along Dunbar over here on 41st as well, and more developing sort of up here towards Kitsilano and Point Grey. And those are considerably more affordable. The typical price for a condominium in this area is actually 2% below what's typical for the city. There's no information on townhouses and half duplexes, and that's primarily because there just is no typical townhouse or half duplex in Dunbar. There's so few of them that the real estate board doesn't monitor that information. All right, so let's move to Kitsilano. And Kitsilano is just to the north, and there we are. And it's probably one of the most well-known neighborhoods in the city of Vancouver. It's centered along 4th Avenue and Broadway. Those are the main shopping districts. You're going to find a lot of really interesting mom and pop type stores. You can see over here, Greektown. There was a very strong, or still is, a very strong Greek community in this neighborhood. It's also centered on the beaches to the north, and Kit's Beach over here. There's a dog park, and actually the dog park is right up here, and Kit's Beach is an incredibly popular beach. This northern part of Kitsilano, north of 4th, predominantly is almost exclusively condominiums. And a lot of it is older stock, stuff that was built in the 70s. So that will typically be cheaper, less expensive than things that are built newer. But lots of people love to live in that area, especially newcomers to the city. It's perhaps one of the neighborhoods that is most, connected to what it's like to really live in the city, because you have beautiful views like this one of the city and the beach and the mountains. You can see from here, you're just looking straight across over to the mountains to the north. And then it's also just very central. So you're getting downtown very quickly and easily, but you're also in sort of a quieter part of the city. And sort of south of Broadway, I'd say, is where there's more single family residential. So in terms of prices, typical price of a single family home in Kitsilano is 6% above the average for the city. A typical condominium is 12% below, and a typical townhouse is 7% above. In terms of commuting, as you can see, we're pretty close to downtown. It would take you anywhere from 7 minutes to 20 minutes to get downtown. And commuting by bus would be 15 minutes. And as I was mentioning for the Dunbar area, very soon we're currently constructing the Broadway Skytrain extension, which will run up until Arbutus right here. So that's going to be very convenient for people that live in Kitsilano. Again, whether you're going downtown or further east out of the city, to do so pretty quickly. Now we're going to look at the Cambie neighborhood. Now, right here we have Queen Elizabeth Park, and Queen Elizabeth Park is stunningly beautiful. It's the highest point in the city of Vancouver, and that is the conservatory, well worth a visit, but also a very popular family neighborhood. So Cambie Street runs from downtown, from north to south here, and there is a Skytrain. So this is the Skytrain line that will run out to the airport. So it's very convenient. Basically, all the areas that are now serviced by the Skytrain have become very popular residential neighborhoods, and it makes getting anywhere a lot easier. So if you're somebody, if you're a pilot or you travel a lot for work, that's going to be a big draw for people to live in the Cambie neighborhood, because it's very easy to get out to the airport, which is over here, and the Skytrain line runs basically right along this route, taking you out to the airport. Mostly single family residential again, especially up in this area, but it is changing with the Skytrain development. There's a lot of higher density being built directly along Cambie Street. And then also down here, there's a much higher density part of the neighborhood where there's already a lot of condo developments, and built mainly in the last 10 years or so. And this is the main shopping area. Some big box retailers. So outside of downtown and outside of the suburbs, this is the part of the city of Vancouver where you're going to find places like a big Canadian Tire, big Home Depot, there's Winners, there's Save on Foods, right around this central zone. And that's centered around that Skytrain, the main Skytrain station. There's also the General Hospital. Our main city hospital is right there as well. So many doctors and nurses live in this area. They find it really convenient to live close to where they're working. And so it has become one of probably the most popular family neighborhood in the city. And so prices are well above the typical house price. It's actually 16% higher. For condominiums, it's 38% higher. And for townhouses and duplexes, it's 33%. So you can see just with those numbers, that's become one of the most popular neighborhoods. Of course, it has to be within your budget. Now, if it's not, there's some other options, depending on what your budget is. But many people that would like to be right here look slightly further east. And that's basically the way that our city works, that traditionally, the most expensive neighborhoods are furthest west. And then as you go further east and kind of south, prices fall down. And so as this neighborhood grew in popularity, then people basically just shifted their eyes a little further east over to Main Street. And as I said, I live just up here in this part of Main Street. And as Main Street's become more popular, well, people shift a little over to Fraser. So this whole zone, Cambie, Main, and Fraser, is really the hottest part of real estate in the city, especially among families. Very walkable neighborhoods. People take care of their homes. Lots of shops and services catering to families and young professionals. And did I mention lots of parks? But yeah, they're all scattered throughout here. Excellent schools, but really, as I've talked about in previous videos, schools all over Vancouver are considered to be very good and are very close. Every neighborhood has its own school, elementary school, at least one, usually a couple, and then there's at least one high school as well. If you're finding value in this video, I'd love it if you could just give it a thumbs up so other people just like you can also find this video. And if you really, really love it, want to see more content just like it, hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any of my future videos. All right, so let's talk about Fairview. At its neighboring neighborhood, Kitsilano, Fairview is a little more settled than Kitsilano. So a little bit less rental units, more condominiums, more townhouses, larger units. And this can also be called the Fairview Slopes because it's actually quite, as you can see maybe in this picture on the left, there's an incline coming up out of False Creek, building up off of the water. And so this whole development that happened primarily in the late 70s through to the mid 80s, those units, those homes predominantly have incredible views, and you get a beautiful, right in the foreground, you have the city of Vancouver in those views, and then you have the mountains as a backdrop. And so if you can find the right place in there, wow, it is killer. It is so beautiful. A really nice spot. And again, you're so central to the city, so close to downtown. So in commuting terms, what do we have? We have anywhere from 5 minutes to 15 minutes if you're driving, and 15 minutes for transportation by bus. That's so really, really close. And its main shopping sort of center is along here on Broadway. This neighborhood has the Vancouver General Hospital in it. And again, similar to Cambie, which is right next door, you find a lot of doctors and nurses living in this neighborhood, and a lot of professionals that end up, working downtown live here as well. And this is Grandview Island. So that's it's quite a tourist destination. Most people that have been to Vancouver have heard of Grandview Island, but it's a great place to visit. It's a great place just to walk to. I wouldn't recommend driving there if you live in this neighborhood. It's can be quite traumatic to get in and out of there, especially on a weekend. But a great place to spend a few extra hours and buy some amazing, amazing food. The freshest seafood, the freshest produce. And again, great parks. There's no real beaches in this area, but water access for sure. If you're going to the beach, you'd be heading over to Kits Beach, Jericho over here, or Spanish Banks down here. Spanish Banks is my personal favorite. Just the tide gets really low. The water is really warm relative to some of these other beaches. But you can walk out, a kilometer at low tide, and it's pretty spectacular. Highly recommend that. All right. So in terms of prices, we don't have any single family residential that's part of this zone. So predominantly just condos and townhouses. The condos are 9% above what's typical for the city of Vancouver, and the townhouses and duplexes are 23% below. All right, so now we're going to move away from the west side and over to the downtown core, which is this peninsula right here. And what we're going to look at first is the West End. I mentioned that earlier, the West End over here. Now, the West End is actually the very first high-density residential zone in Vancouver, and it started in the 40s and 50s, long before we had strata. So there's different forms of shared ownership here that we have in most of the rest of the city. There's quite a bit of co-op housing and also leasehold housing. And those are more affordable options, but also freehold. And just to the north northwest, basically. This green area, that's Stanley Park, and it's a massive park right at the edge of downtown. It makes living in the West End pretty magical, having that right at your doorstep. When I was a kid, occasionally this Lost Lagoon would freeze over and you could ice skate on it. And there's the seawall that goes all the way around. Pretty, lots of people love to run that, cycle it. Good morning stroll. You have beaches here, English Bay Beach, Second Beach. There's Third Beach as well. There's a freshwater pool, or actually, I'm not sure it's freshwater anymore. I don't think it is. But there's a swimming pool right here, outdoor swimming pool. It's just a really incredible place to have right next door. And of course, just strolling along the beach right here is pretty exquisite. And the nicest part that I find of the West End is west of Denman. This area in here, every time I go there, I just feel like I'm on vacation. Everybody's a little more relaxed. It's a lot of older condominium buildings, but they're beautiful, very well maintained. A lot of really interesting living options in the West End. And it is for families as well. And that's something I think that, in many other parts of the world and even parts of Canada, you don't find families living downtown, but you do find that in Vancouver. And that would be partially because of how expensive the city is, but also just because of it being safe and accessible and the kinds of shops and services that are around. There's a lot that caters to families living in high density neighborhoods. So in the West End, what we'll find is we're obviously incredibly close to the downtown core. It takes anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes to drive. Transit would be 12 minutes by bus. And in the West End, your main shopping areas are here along Denman, here along Davie, and over here on Robson as well. So many food options, so many great cafes, a few good grocery stores catering to all the people that live in this area. Another swimming pool over here, Vancouver Aquatic Center, place where I learned to swim when I was a kid. And in terms of prices, we have condos are 15% below the typical price of the city. And then townhouses are 8% below. So considering how close we are to downtown, this really ends up being what I would consider the best value. Not everybody wants to live that close to downtown or in that kind of high density. And part of the reason that you see these prices being a bit lower is because predominantly most of what's built there is a little bit older, and that does tend to be a little more affordable, but really, really great value in my opinion. Now we're going to look at one of the newer zones in downtown, and that would be Yaletown. Now, I would say Yaletown's sort of in a bit bigger area that I'm sort of encircling right now. This red outline is the core of Yaletown, and it used to be a warehouse district for the city. It was converted really in the 80s from warehouse industrial to residential. And so there's a lot of interesting buildings that have been modernized that were built or converted around that time. Really cool loft style, New York style living in this zone. And it's surrounded by a lot of high density, really big condominium buildings that were built anytime from the late 80s through till very recently, the last few years. It's mostly built out now. You can still find a couple buildings that are brand new, but predominantly this is all completed. So you have some community center right there. You have BC Place, GM Place as well. You have parks along the water. You have access to the seawall. And again, you're just so incredibly close to the downtown core. You really don't need a car if you live either in the West End or in Yaletown. Many people don't. Very walkable. Everything's right at your doorstep. And again, this is very popular with young families and young professionals. Yaletown's going to be a little bit noisier, I would say, than the West End. There's a little more action. There's more bars, more nightlife in Yaletown than there is in the West End. That'd be the main difference. And in terms of prices, condominiums are 17% above what's typical, and townhouses are 41%. So you can see, again, prices are higher than what you'd find in the West End. And predominantly, I would say that's because of age. Much newer housing stock in Yaletown than you'll find in the West End. So that wraps up our view of the west side of the city. So there's the city of Vancouver. We're going to concentrate a little more on the east side of the city. So East Vancouver here. And what are some of the best areas? Now, I mentioned when we were looking at Cambie, which is over here, that what's become much more popular in recent years is Main Street and Fraser. When I was a kid, having grown up in the city, these areas in East Vancouver were areas that you weren't really supposed to go in. They could be dangerous, and today that's really not the case. The one area you might want to avoid a little bit, especially with young children, is down here, Main and Hastings. Right there. But almost everywhere in the city, no big deal to be out with kids, and lots of family communities all around the city. So Main Street, it's funny, it goes right to the liquor store. So Main Street right here, this is it, going right down the center of the map. As you can see over here, Riley Park, Little Mountain. Now, some people may just call it Main Street. Some people will call it Riley Park. Some people will call it Little Mountain. Traditionally, Riley Park and Little Mountain are a little further to the south, and Mount Pleasant is up here to the north. But I'm talking about all these areas when I talk about Main Street. And Main Street is a wonderful area. As I said, I live a little bit on the southern end of Main Street. I love it. It's a wonderful place to be bringing up my kids. Kids are out playing in the street, having fun together, very safe. We have Queen Elizabeth Park nearby, Vancouver Canadians baseball. They play right there. And good schools. My son's school is right up here at General Brock. And this Main Street is just a very eclectic, interesting place to live. Lots of great shops and services. Coffee, this is the center, well, two of the best places in the city to find coffee, and excellent restaurants as well. I don't know if you've been paying attention to some of the news about Vancouver recently, but Michelin-starred restaurants are kind of in this area, Main Street and on Fraser, if they're not downtown. A lot of single-family residential, predominantly in the southern part. Once you get north up here around Mount Pleasant, that's a lot of higher density, usually not as tall buildings as you'll find downtown, but some very substantial condominium buildings in this area. That Broadway Skytrain is going to be running right through the middle of this. Another Skytrain is up here by Terminal. So this is just a very central, you can see how central this neighborhood is to the city. Kind of Cambie, Main, and Fraser, I would describe as being at the center, at the heart of the city. So, for couples where one person is maybe working downtown and somebody else is working over here at Burnaby or out at the airport, this becomes a choice, an option for a lot of people where they like to be central and not find themselves commuting too far. In terms of commuting times, you're looking at anywhere from 12 minutes to 28 minutes to get from here into downtown, depending on the traffic, and 35 minutes by bus. And then in terms of price, the typical house is 19% below. And then condos are actually 21% higher, and townhouses are 9% below. Now, I would explain that the condos being higher is because there is quite a bit of newer condominiums that have been built in this area. But yeah, I love this neighborhood, and really anywhere in this zone. If you are a family, if you're looking for a safe neighborhood, a place where your family can grow up and be a part of the community, highly recommend it. But of course, it has to be within your budget. And higher density tends to be built up along areas like Main Street, along Fraser, along Cambie, Broadway, and 41st would be some of the other areas, 33rd, and there's a massive development that is actually going into this area in the next couple of years. We're talking in the neighborhood of over 2,000 homes being built in this neighborhood. So that'll be large condominium development. And also up here at Oak Ridge, there's a massive development that's going on. This is actually in that Cambie neighborhood, or Oak Ridge actually technically, but it's to the south of Cambie, and some very, very high end. It's going to be an incredibly beautiful master plan development that's happening there. Well worth checking out if it's 2 years in the future, or they actually have completed the project. And then let's take a look at Hastings Sunrise. That's pretty much the furthest you can go to the northeast in the city of Vancouver. And this is what I would say is probably one of the more affordable options. It's a really good family neighborhood, lots of single family residential on the southern part of this area. To the north, there's a lot of higher density condominium developments. This is the one beach in East Vancouver, at least saltwater beach, and so you get some nice outdoor access here, and it's a very walkable neighborhood, a very interesting stretch of Hastings along here. This isn't the downtown east side Hastings. This is an old school neighborhood that primarily Italian. So you still have some of those old Italian delis and cafes. Really good shopping. And you also have sort of a newer Chinese population. So a lot of the shops and services will, like there's a T&T on, I think it's over here, that caters to some of the more recent groups of people that have moved into this neighborhood. In terms of commuting, it's a 15-minute drive downtown, anywhere from 15 minutes to 35 minutes. And then 25 minutes by bus. And that would be basically, just going along Hastings here. And to me, this is also, if you're looking for a neighborhood that has easy accessibility getting out of the city, heading north along Highway 1 up to Whistler or over to the ferry terminal, which is over here in Horseshoe Bay, or heading out east along the highway going out to the Okanagan or something for the weekend or down to the States. Hastings Sunrise is one of those areas that is easiest just to get out of the city. Because sometimes, especially let's say you're living over here in Dunbar, it can be a real pain. Half your trip getting, to the ferry is just struggling getting over here to the highway and then out of the city, or up here, you would probably go this way actually. But then you're cutting through the downtown core. So that can be pretty annoying. And if a lot of what you're moving here for is accessibility getting elsewhere, well, I'd give Hastings Sunrise a real hard think. There's some really nice single family homes in this area, a lot of older housing stock. If you're into those character houses, beautiful stuff in here. And in terms of prices, for single family residential, it's 32% below what's typical. And in terms of condos, it's 34% below. No data for townhouses just because there's not enough of them. So as I said, really good value in Hastings Sunrise. Definitely give it consideration. The last area I'm going to talk about in East Vancouver is Grandview Woodlands. So we're right beside Hastings Sunrise. And Grandview Woodlands is also probably better known as Commercial Drive. And you can see that Commercial Drive runs right through here. And as I said, with Hastings Sunrise, an older Italian immigrant population, that's really at the heart of Commercial Drive. It's known for its Italian and Portuguese heritage. It's a place to go to watch World Cup soccer games, amazing Italian coffee, little cafes along here. It's, as I had said about Main Street being eclectic, this is really the most eclectic neighborhood in the city. A real diversity of population. And so if you want to live in a colorful, interesting place, and again, a place that's pretty accessible, getting out of the city, really easy access to the highway and very close downtown as well. Well, Commercial Drive is definitely an area to think about. To the far north is very industrial. That is the Port of Vancouver down along there. So there's no real water access here. You'd have to go over to New Brighton or over here to Stanley Park, downtown to the west end, or out to the beaches on the west side of Vancouver, Kitts Beach and stuff. Lots of little parks, lots of festivals, lots of interesting, I mentioned the cafes, but restaurants and shops. There's a real diversity of options. In terms of prices, detached homes are 25% below what's typical. Condos are 23% below, and townhouses are 6% above. And in commuting times, we're 10 minutes at best downtown, up to 25-minute bus ride to get downtown. Now, there's also, it depends on where you live. If you live up here, you're going to have to take the bus. But this is one of the busier Skytrain stations at the at the commercial drive Skytrain station, and that'll take you right downtown as well, and that'll be much faster than 25 minutes. And I will just let's see if we can get the Skytrain lines on here. All right, there we go. All right, so here's the Skytrain lines in the city of Vancouver. So you can see the Canada line running here, as I mentioned earlier, going from downtown, and it takes you out to the airport and also into Richmond. Here's another line running out, there we go, in a loop. That's the Expo line. And so this one, you know, when I mentioned New West, that's the line that goes out to New Westminster. This was the first part of the Skytrain. It also goes all the way out to Surrey and loops around into to Burnaby, I should say. And then we have, that's the West Coast Express. And that takes you way out. That can take you all the way out to Mission. There's also an arm, it's not showing up here on the map, but an extension that runs up here through Clark Road, heads out to Port Moody and terminates over here in Coquitlam. That's the one that I was trying to find. But as you can see at the moment, there's no Skytrain running to the west side of Vancouver. This one runs down right through the middle of it along Cambie Street. There will be an extension running along here to Arbutus that's going to sort of alleviate some of the pressure on buses running out to UBC. Wow. As you can see, Vancouver's complicated. There's a lot going on here and a lot of variations from one end of the city to the other. There's no way you can figure that all out from a distance just reading blogs. That's why I wanted to create this video. I wanted to make sure you could understand as much as possible about the city before you move here. And that's what I do with all of my clients. If you're thinking of moving here and you want some help, reach out, book a call with me. I'd love to chat with you. We can book it whenever is convenient for you. Just reach out anytime. I got your back when you're moving to Vancouver.